Hello and welcome to the MSC YouTube studio. My name is Charity Ekezie, and today I am joined with Dr. Vera Songwe, the founder and chair of the Liquidity and Sustainability Facility, and also, a very personal favorite because she's from Cameroon and I grew up in Cameroon. Hi, good morning.
Hi, Charity. Nice to
Welcome
meet
to the
you.
studio.
And
Nice to meet
yes,
you too. So you have been described as a prominent economist and developmental expert. Like everywhere I go to look for you, this is what you've been described as. And I am a content creator and a journalist, but mostly a content creator who dispels stereotypes about Africa. So much negativity about Africa is out there. And I always try to preach the positivity. Like I feel like we need to put our best foot forward,
hmm
and our PR needs to be a bit better. So that drives me to the question I have for you today. So Africa is often seen as a continent facing a lot of economic challenges. But the thing is, people ignore the fact that there are many success stories. So my question is, what do you think are the biggest economic opportunities for Africa in the next decade?
it's a very good question. And thank you again. Yes, it's a pleasure to be here at the Munich Security Council and talking to you, especially. Another very successful woman.
Yes,
Let's start
I'm
with that.
trying.
No, I think a couple of things that will be and determine Africa's future and why Africa is clearly an important part of the global development dialogue is the first is our youth and its population. And I hasten to say that population can go both ways. By 2050, 1 in 4 will be African. But we need 1 in 4 of those Africans to be educated,
Yeah.
to be able to integrate the digital age. I just came from Paris at the AI summit. We need the engineers, we need the content producers like you.
Yeah.
We should not only be the consumers. I think a lot of the discussion today is about, the population of Africa is going to increase and we're going to be a market. But we don't want to just be a market. We also want to be a supplier of goods that people can consume. And I think this is particularly important. The good news is that education on the continent has advanced substantially from the 1960s. We have almost 70% of our young girls are in school today. They were not in school before, but we still have a struggle with, and we need to improve on the quality of that. So that's one. The second one, of course, is rare minerals.
Yeah.
We have, the rare minerals that are needed to produce the economy of the future. I think in the summit and many other places, we will be talking about the need for rare minerals to be able to sort of fight the chips war or be, advance in the chips war in Paris. We just heard $190 billion to sort of reshape the French chips industry, $500 billion to reshape the American industry. We would like, $1 billion announcement to reshape the African industry. We have those resources. So I think the AI digitization is a huge and important component where Africa, again, is an important component. Third, and maybe it should have been first, is climate change. And this, Africa has 2 ways to go with climate change. We have the benefit of not being a huge emitter of greenhouse gases. And the huge positive is that actually we capture and sequester because of the peatlands, almost 3 years of carbon emissions every year. So essentially, we're cleaning the world for everybody else. We need to put a price to that carbon, and the resources from putting a price to that carbon can actually help us develop even more. But we need to be able to value our natural capital assets, our biodiversity, and put a price to that and do it in a way that is efficient. So I think if you look at those 3 things, is our youth and everything that they can do, the minerals that we have today, the AI challenge that is a global challenge, and how we go forward with that. And finally, the benefits that Africa gives to the world by sequestering carbon and allowing us, hopefully, to wake up and quickly begin to react to the climate. Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing you mentioned Africa's youth population because my next question is definitely tailored towards that. My question is, how do we better support the youth to be able to drive economic change and innovation in Africa? Like, how do we better support these African youths? Like, what should we do? What can be done?
The first thing that we need to do is to improve the policy environment. If we can improve the policy environment so that the youth can get quicker access, I talked about AI. if you really wanted to support the youth in Africa, make access to the internet faster, cheaper, and available.
I agree.
This is simple. The second thing is allow under the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement for free mobility so that, youth who have huge skills and want to sort of maybe supply it, if you're from West Africa, you grew up in Cameroon. So there you go, open borders so that, access to the best technology for the areas that you want to do well. If you want to do pharmacy, you go to Southern Africa. If you want to do agriculture and manufacturing of fertilizer, you can go to Morocco. If you wanted to do IT technology, you can go to Kenya. I think the good thing about Africa is that we're beginning to develop poles of specialization, and this kid, the young people should be able to move around. And if we do that, we get the AFCFTA into action. It would increase our trade, it would increase our productivity, and it will clearly give the youth an opportunity. Secondly, we need to create access to finance for them. They need better access to finance, better, cheap and long-term financing to be able to realize their investment dreams.
I'm really excited you talked about open borders. I think that's one of the biggest parts I'm super excited about. And I hope that it will eventually be a lot easier to travel within Africa than to travel outside Africa, because I'm a big advocate for that. So thank you for saying that. So how can Africa work better with global partners to make sure that these economic growth benefits will definitely benefit everybody, especially those in the rural areas? How do we get to them?
Three things. With global partners, I think the first thing, Africa needs its own strategies. Africa needs to develop a strategy on how it engages with global partners. And that is happening now. There's more and more countries are beginning to sort of come up with their own national development plans. And then there is, of course, the African Union and sort of the regional development plans that are put forward through that. The second thing is Africa must also become a financier of its own development. Africa cannot continue to be dependent on others' resources to develop itself. And until Africa does that, it will never really have an equal seat at the table. And finally, Africa must engage with the global community to get a level playing field in the governance environment. Africa must be able, Africa's voice and vote must matter in global institutions so that it can actually engage equitably. On the rural community side, because your question was a little bit two-part, how do we engage with outside?
How do we like make sure that these benefits, these economic growth benefits, even those in the rural areas? Because sometimes it's mostly more beneficial to those of us who live in the city, who live in the urban areas of Africa. Like, how does it get to the grassroots level?
I think once you've done the external, which is sort of the three things I said, the internal is really then making sure that you can redistribute appropriately, right? And so a lot of times we talked about there's no infrastructure, there are no roads, the last mile. Africa today does not collect enough revenue. Tax to GDP is very low. We're averaging somewhere in the order of 25% in the good countries. In the bad countries, it's 7%. That is dismal. In Europe, where we're sitting, it's about 32 to 40%. We need to get once states can collect that kind of revenue, then for those in the rural areas, there's what we call the last mile. Is essentially you need to provide additional services to them at cheaper rates, and this is the most important, so that you can actually make development more inclusive. Those in the cities are probably earning a good enough revenue. They can contribute to the tax basket. They are getting access to electricity, clean water, and all, and so it's much more expensive to deliver the services further out, and that is where the state becomes even more important in this area. So we need to make sure that the presence of governments are felt in those areas, and you can make them growth more inclusive.
Okay, that's everything, but I have a final question. Being a woman, you're literally inspiring me right now, because as an African woman, we know how challenging it can be for us to get to a certain level and not being shunned down. So I wanted to ask if you've ever faced any challenges being a woman in your field and trying to advocate for, economic development in Africa and, just these investments and everything.
Look, being a woman globally is a difficult a challenge. It remains a difficult challenge. I think globally we still have only about 10 women that are represented in global boards.
Sure.
We still have in Africa, I think leadership by women is quite scant, and congratulations to the new and incoming president of Namibia. She adds to female leaders in a lot of our parliaments, which is, I think many people focus on sort of the presidency, but I think one needs to also look at the parliament where legislation is made. And there's so many studies that have shown that when women are in charge, involved, and can contribute to legislation, then they make the kinds of legislation that deliver kindergartens, that deliver
Yes.
facilities, that make sure that as a woman, you can have a family, be it taking care of your mother, your parents, your children, or the sick in your family, and still be able to realize your dreams of getting a job and working. So I think this is the sort of standoff most important point is women in society deliver huge economic returns, whether they're in boards, whether they're at home, or whether they're in business. And so we need to make sure that we can bring them in. Of course, personally, as a woman, you just need to work much harder. You need to
Exactly.
work much harder. You need to be more prepared. You need to be, I think, the best if you can in your field, and you must
Yeah,
be
you
the
say
best.
better than the best.
And you are demonstrating that. And I think that is what is important, is that it's not enough to do it, but it's also good to be able to sort of then project. Because what the younger, I find the younger girls across the globe need is role
It's role
models. They
models,
need to
true.
be able to emulate something, emulate somebody, believe in their dreams. And again, this is where technology is amazing, because you can do and realize your dreams from anywhere, almost anywhere in the world, if we get better access to
Yeah.
internet connectivity, digitization. It really is, I think, the linchpin, including for women, to be able to realize their dreams. And then the women themselves need to be confident. I
Yeah.
think many times women will not go for the opportunity because they're never sure that they're good enough. But if you don't go and if you don't put yourself out there, and I've learned this, and I'm not sure that I do it well enough yet, but many times I'm like, I don't think I'm good.
I'm good.
I should be going for this. And,
Yeah.
but the person young, sort of not as good as me is thinking, the guy behind is like, I'm there, I'm putting my hand up. I'm like, well, what is he doing there? But rather than me asking, what is he doing there? I should show
You should
up.
show up.
And I think that this is important for women to just show up. If you believe you can do it, show up and put your hand up.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Vera, for being here today. You have literally inspired me right now, because this is the first time I'm meeting you and I'm already feeling the rush of
Feeling
emotion.
the
So
vibe.
thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and good luck with the rest of the day.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.